The first thing you need to understand is that Ridgeback Tower isn't remote in the way people imagine when they think of fire lookouts. It's not some pristine wilderness posting where you commune with God and the eagles. Ridgeback sits on a bold granitic spine in the Kiskiminitas National Forest, northern Idaho, and the nearest paved road is 11 miles downslope through second-growth lodgepole that's been logged twice in living memory. The access trail is a decommissioned skid road full of erosion ruts. My truck can make it in dry conditions. In June, when snowmelt turns the upper switchbacks into a creek, I park at the lower gate and hike the last 4 miles with 60 pounds on my back. I'm telling you this because the rule matters more when you understand the geography. We never leave the tower after midnight, not to take a piss, not if you hear something, not if the generator runs dry and the propane heater dies and it's 31 degrees and dropping. You stay inside, you lock the hatch, you wait for dawn. My name is Colton Vásquez. I've staffed Ridgeback for 4 seasons, and before that, I did 2 summers on Deception Peak in the Clearwater Drainage, which is a genuine wilderness, posting no road access at all. Helicopter resupply every 2 weeks. I came to Idaho from Flagstaff, where I got my forestry degree and spent 3 semesters as a hotshot crew trainee before partial ACL tear ended that trajectory. Lookout work was supposed to be temporary, something to do while my knee healed and I figured out whether I wanted to go back to fire suppression or pivot into timber management. That was 6 years ago. My knee works fine now. I'm still here. The thing about Ridgeback specifically is that it's a 2-person tower. There aren't many of those left in the system. Most lookouts are solo postings, 1 observer, 1 radio, 1 Osborne firefinder on a circular map table, and 100 days of solitude. But Ridgeback was built in 1953 as a joint detection communication relay, which means the cab is oversized, 14 by 14 feet, with 2 cots, a double propane burner, and a repeater antenna array on the roof that handles traffic for the entire northeast quadrant of the forest. It requires a minimum of 2 qualified staff because of the communication relay duties. 1 person watches the landscape, while the other manages radio traffic during active fire periods. During quiet stretches, you alternate shifts, 12 on, 12 off. My partner for seasons 2 through 4 was a woman named Dara Whitfield, 38, former Army signals specialist, quiet in the way that signals people tend to be comfortable with long silence, precise when she spoke, methodical in everything. She'd done 3 seasons before I arrived and knew the tower's rhythms better than anyone. The roof leaked in the northwest corner during heavy rain. The Osborne's east-facing sight line was partially obstructed by a dead whitebark pine that nobody had been authorized to fell. The radio repeater drew a parasitic load from the solar bank after 2 a.m. that could drain the batteries to 60% by dawn if you didn't switch to the backup array manually. Dara taught me these things my first week. She also taught me the rule. After midnight, we're inside, both of us, hatch bolted. No exceptions. I assumed it was a bare protocol. Ridgeback's ridge gets grisly traffic in July when the huckleberries ripen on the south slope. And the catwalk around the cab, the exterior observation deck with its railing and narrow walkway is only 3 feet wide, which isn't a place you want to encounter anything large in the dark. "It's not bears," Dara said. She was calibrating the firefinder when she said it, not looking at me. "It's policy. District policy. Been in effect since before my time." I asked where I could read the policy. "It's not written anywhere you'd find it." She aligned the crosshair with a distant ridge. "Russ told me. He did 12 seasons up here before his back gave out. He told me day 1, same as I'm telling you. What happens if you go outside after midnight?" Dara looked at me then. Her face wasn't frightened. It was the expression you see on someone explaining a table saw to a new shop student, careful, patient, aware that the consequences of misunderstanding are permanent. "I don't know," she said, "because I've never done it. And neither did Russ, and neither did the woman before him. That's all I can tell you. I let it go. You learn to let things go in this work. Lookout culture is strange, part tradition, part superstition, part genuine operational wisdom accumulated over decades by people who spend 5 months a year alone on mountaintops. Every tower has its quirks, its unwritten rules, its ghost stories. I figured the Midnight Rule was Ridgeback's version of that. A local legend that had calcified into protocol through sheer repetition. For most of my first season, it didn't matter. Summer nights in Idaho's high country are short, true darkness, lasts maybe 5 hours in July, and by midnight I was usually asleep anyway. The shift change happened at 9 p.m. Whoever was on night watch ran the radio until 6 a.m., monitoring the repeater and logging any overnight traffic from backcountry crews. It was quiet work. You sat in the dark cab with the glow of the radio panel and the stars through the glass and the enormous silence of the mountains, and you listened. Occasionally, a crew would radio in a weather check or a position update. Mostly, it was dead air. The first time I heard footsteps on the catwalk was August 14th, my rookie year. 2:47 a.m. by the clock on the radio console. I was in the chair by the east windows, reading a paperback with a headlamp. Dara was asleep on her cot behind the privacy curtain. The night was windless, one of those high-pressure inversions where the air goes absolutely still and you can hear a branch snap half a mile away. The footsteps were distinct, not animal movement, which tends to be irregular, pattering. These were bipedal, measured, someone walking slowly around the exterior catwalk, starting from the north side and moving clockwise. I switched off my headlamp and sat motionless. The steps continued. They had weight to them. The catwalk's steel grating produces a specific resonance under load, a faint ringing vibration that travels through the cab's floor joists. I could feel it in my feet through my socks. One full circuit, north to east, to south to west, to north again. Then a pause at the hatch, the exterior door on the south side which opens onto the catwalk from the cab. I heard something touch the handle. Not try it, touch it. A single light contact, as if confirming its position. Then the steps resumed. A second circuit. Same pace, same direction. I did not move. I did not wake Dara. I sat with my book in my lap and my headlamp dark, and I listened to whatever it was complete its second orbit and stop again at the hatch. This time the pause was longer, maybe 10 seconds. Then it moved away, not continuing the circuit, but descending. I heard the ladder. The steel rungs of Ridgeback's 60-foot access ladder have a specific pitch when weight moves across them. This was heavier than a raccoon, heavier than a person my size. Whatever it was went down the full 60 feet. I heard the last rung, the one near the ground that has a slight bend and produces a lower tone than the others, and then nothing. The silence re-established itself like water closing over a stone. I sat awake until dawn. When the sky grayed up and the first bird started, I went outside and checked the catwalk. Nothing. No scratches on the grating, no scat, no hair caught on bolt heads. The hatch handle was clean. I walked the full perimeter and found nothing out of place. At breakfast, I told Dara what I'd heard. She nodded once, slowly, the way you'd acknowledge a weather report confirming what you already expected. "How often?" she asked. "What? You heard one circuit or more than one?" "2 circuits, then it went down the ladder." She wrote something in a small spiral notebook she kept in her vest pocket. I'd seen her write in it before, but assumed it was personal, a journal, a letter home. "Is that normal?" I asked. Normal isn't the word I'd use. She poured coffee from the percolator. "Regular. It's regular. July through September, mostly. Some years more than others." "What is it?" "I've never looked." She said this without shame or evasion. "Russ never looked. The rule is the rule." "Dara, that's insane. Something is climbing a 60-foot steel ladder and walking around our—" "Yes." She looked at me over her mug. And the rule says we stay inside, and nothing has ever broken through the hatch, or the windows, or the floor. And every morning the catwalk is empty, and the ladder is empty, and there's nothing in the tree line that shouldn't be there. And we go back to work. I wanted to argue. The part of me trained in systematic observation, the part that spent 3 semesters learning to identify, classify, and respond to natural hazards. Wanted to set up a camera, rig a motion sensor, do something quantifiable. But Dara's expression wasn't irrational. It was the look of someone who'd been through a cost-benefit analysis and determined that the current protocol was working. "Has it ever tried to get in?" I asked. Define tried. "Has it ever applied force to the hatch or the windows?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, in my second season, it stopped at the hatch for 40 minutes. I was awake. I could see the handle. It didn't move, but I could hear breathing on the other side. Slow, very slow, like it was waiting to hear me breathe back. "Did you?" I held my breath until I nearly passed out. Then I breathed into my pillow so the sound would be muffled. She smiled slightly. Dramatic, I know. But it left after that. Went down the ladder, same as always. We didn't discuss it again that season. It happened 3 more times, once in late August, twice in September. Always between 2 and 4 a.m. Always the same pattern. Ascent, circuits, hatch pause, descent. I never looked. I kept my headlamp off, stayed still, and waited. By the 3rd occurrence, I'd stopped being afraid exactly and started being something else. Hyper-aware. The way you get when you're living alongside something that operates on rules you don't understand but can predict. At season's end, I drove down the mountain and spent the winter bartending in Missoula. I told no one about the footsteps, partly because it sounded insane, partly because I wasn't sure what telling would accomplish. There was no damage, no threat I could articulate, no evidence that would survive the drive down 11 miles of dirt road. Just a sound in the dark and a rule that worked. I came back for season 2, and 3, and 4. Each year, the pattern was consistent but not identical. The visits increased in frequency as the summer progressed, 1 or 2 in July, weekly by late August, and in September, sometimes consecutive nights. The circuits varied. I logged as few as 1 and as many as 7 in a single visit. The duration of the hatch pause was unpredictable, but trended longer over the 4 seasons. In my first year, the longest pause was Dara's 40-minute incident. By my 4th year, I clocked a pause that lasted 1 hour and 16 minutes. I know because I was staring at the radio clock the entire time, counting my breaths, keeping them shallow. I started my own notebook in season 2. Small observations, logged with times and dates. Environmental conditions. Moon phase. Temperature. Whether the repeater was active. Whether we'd had radio traffic that evening. I wasn't trying to be scientific about it. I just wanted to know if the pattern correlated with anything measurable. It didn't. Or if it did, the correlation was too subtle for my amateur analysis to detect. The visits seemed truly random relative to weather, lunar cycle, radioactivity, and fire conditions. The only consistent variable was time, always after midnight, always concluded before first light. Dara and I developed a shorthand. If one of us was awake when it started, we'd tap twice on the wooden bed frame. 2 soft knocks, meaning, "I hear it too. Stay still." We never spoke during visits. We never turned on lights. We existed in the dark with it the way you exist in a tent with a bear outside minimizing your signature, trusting the thin barrier between you and whatever occupies the same darkness. The beginning of my 4th season is when things changed. Dara didn't come back. I got the call from District Ranger Emmons in early June while I was still staging gear in town. "Whitfield's not returning this year. Medical. We've got a replacement coming up with you, Tucson, Jesse. New hire. 1 season at Blacktail Butte in Wyoming. Solid references. I asked what happened to Dara. Medical leave. That's all I'm authorized to say. I tried calling her. The number I had went to voicemail 3 times before a recording told me it was disconnected. I drove by her winter address in Coeur d'Alene, a rented house near the community college where she taught an intro electronics course in the off-season. The house had new tenants. They didn't know her. I won't pretend this didn't unsettle me. Dara was the other half of an operational unit that had functioned smoothly for 3 years. She was also the repository of institutional knowledge about Ridgeback's specific conditions. Knowledge that existed nowhere in writing, passed mouth to mouth from Russ to Dara, to me. Jesse Toussaint arrived at the lower gate on June 19th in a Subaru Outback packed to the roof with gear. 26, lean, recently graduated from a wilderness education program in Colorado. Enthusiastic in a way that made me feel old at 32. He had good eyes, you could tell by the way he picked out distant features on the drive up, and he'd already memorized the radio protocols for our district. I liked him. He reminded me of myself 6 years ago, before the knee, before Ridgeback, before I'd learned to sit in the dark and count circuits. I told him the rule on day 1. After midnight, we're inside, both of us. Hatch bolted, no exceptions. Jesse's reaction was the same as mine had been. Raised eyebrows, half smile, waiting for the punchline. Bare protocol? No. I was calibrating the Osborne. I remember the sight line I was checking, 247 degrees toward Sleeping Woman Ridge, because I was staring at it instead of looking at him. It's just the rule. It's been in effect since before I got here, since before the person before me, probably decades. What's the rationale? Something comes up the ladder at night, walks the catwalk, checks the hatch, leaves before dawn. The rule is, we don't go outside while it's happening. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you've heard it. Many times. But never seen it. Never looked. And nothing bad has happened. Nothing has happened at all. That's the point. We follow the rule, and nothing happens. I intend to keep that record intact. Jesse nodded slowly. I could see him processing, the same way I had weighing the irrationality of the claim against the evident sanity of the person delivering it. I'd been in his position. I knew the internal negotiation. Okay, he said. I'll follow the rule. The first 6 weeks were quiet. July was a busy fire month. We called in 14 smokes between us, 8 of which developed into managed fires requiring crew deployment. The radio repeater ran hot, handling traffic for 3 active incident command teams in our quadrant. We worked long hours, slept when we could, fell into the rhythm. Jesse was good at the job, patient behind the binoculars, precise on the radio, quick to learn the landscape's moods. He identified a fire I'd missed one afternoon, a single tree strike on a north-facing slope that was barely producing visible smoke, but throwing heat that distorted the air above it. Good eyes. The first visit came on July 28th, 3:11 a.m. I was on night shift, sitting in the dark with the radio's green glow. The footsteps started mid-ladder. I didn't hear the initial ascent, which was unusual. Normally, I caught it from the first rung. The climbing sound approached rapidly, heavier than I remembered, and then the grating rang as weight transferred onto the catwalk. 1 circuit, fast, not the measured pace I was used to. This was almost hurried, purposeful, like someone late for something. It stopped at the hatch. The handle moved. Not a touch this time. The handle rotated downward, the full throw of the latch mechanism. I heard the tongue clear the strike plate. The hatch was unbolted from outside. I was already moving. I crossed the cab in 2 strides and slammed my palm against the hatch, holding it shut. The handle was still depressed on the other side. I could feel the pressure, not enormous, not violent, but steady. Something was pulling. I grabbed the interior deadbolt, a steel slide bolt that Dara had installed herself. she'd told me, in her first season and rammed it home. The hatch shuddered once. Then the handle released. The pressure ceased. I stood with my hand on the bolt, breathing hard. Behind me, Jesse's cot creaked. "Colton, stay in bed." "What's—" "Stay in bed and be quiet." The footsteps resumed, not circling, standing still. I could hear the grating creak with shifting weight, like someone adjusting their stance. Right outside the hatch. 2 feet of steel and bolted lumber between us. Then, and this is the part I've replayed in my memory more times than I can count, it knocked. 3 measured raps on the hatch, not aggressive, not frantic, the cadence of someone knocking on a neighbor's door. Polite, patient. I said nothing. Did nothing. Held the bolt. 3 more knocks, same cadence, same force. Then silence. The weight shifted. Footsteps moving away, not toward the ladder, but continuing around the catwalk. Clockwise. It completed a full circuit and came back to the hatch. Knocked again. 3 times. This repeated circuit, return, knock 4 more times over the next half hour. Then it descended the ladder. I heard every rung. The bent one near the bottom sang its lower note. Then silence. I didn't move from the hatch until dawn. Jesse didn't ask questions that morning. He'd heard the knocking. He'd heard me slam the bolt. He sat on his cot and watched me stand there for 3 hours, and when the sky finally grayed, he just said, "Coffee?" I called Ranger Emmons at 8 a.m. using the satellite phone. "Something tried to open the hatch last night." Silence on the line. Then, "The exterior hatch." "Yes, something operated the handle, tried to pull it open." I engaged the deadbolt. "Was the primary latch secured when this occurred?" "No, it was after midnight. I was on shift. I hadn't—" I stopped. The primary latch, the handle latch. It's an exterior mechanism designed to be operated from outside for when you're on the catwalk and need to re-enter. It isn't a security lock. It's a convenience. The deadbolt is the security. "You need to bolt the deadbolt every night at midnight," Emmons said. His voice was steady but tight. "That's part of the protocol." "Nobody told me to bolt it. Dara never—" "Whitfield knew to bolt it. That's standard for Ridgeback. You know about this." It wasn't a question. "You know what comes up here." Another silence. I could hear wind in the background. He was probably at his truck somewhere on the district. "Vásquez, listen to me. The midnight rule exists for a reason. The bolt exists for a reason. The tower has been operating safely under these protocols for a long time. Follow them precisely, and you'll have no problems." "What is it?" "I don't have an answer for you." "Emmons, I don't have an answer because no one has looked. That's the protocol. You don't look, you don't engage, you secure the cab and wait for morning. This has worked for 30 years. Are you hearing me? 30 years. At least, I inherited this posting from my predecessor. He gave me the same briefing I'm giving you. Bolt the hatch at midnight. Don't go out. Don't look. Don't respond to contact. Morning always comes." I asked about Dara. Why she really left. "Medical leave," he said. "That's the truth. She has a medical condition that makes it inadvisable for her to continue at Ridgeback. I can't say more than that." I let it go, but I noticed he said at Ridgeback rather than in the field or at a lookout. The specificity of it stayed with me. That night, I bolted the hatch at midnight precisely. Jesse was already in his cot. The propane heater ticked. The radio hummed its carrier tone. I sat in the dark and waited. Nothing came that night, or the next, or for the following 11 days. When it returned August the 9th, 2:22 a.m., the pattern had changed again. No ladder sounds, no approach. Just sudden presence on the catwalk, as if it had materialized there. One heavy step directly outside the hatch, then knocking. 3 raps. I was in my cot this time. I stayed flat, breathing into my pillow the way Dara had described. The bolt was engaged. The hatch was secure. The knocking came again, then a sound I'd never heard before. A voice. Low, resonant, not quite forming words. It was like someone speaking through a wall of water, the cadence and emphasis of human speech without intelligible content, rising and falling in what might have been a sentence. Then silence. Then the voice again. The same, not quite sentence, with what might have been a questioning inflection at the end. Jesse's cot creaked. I heard him sit up. "Don't," I whispered. The voice outside continued. 3 more iterations of the same phrase, if it was a phrase. Each time the final tone rose. A question. It was asking something. Then footsteps, moving to the east side of the catwalk. A long pause. Footsteps to the north side. Another pause. Circling but stopping at each cardinal point as if looking in each direction. Then back to the hatch. 3 knocks. The voice again. This time, something in the term changed. A new quality entered it, something I can only describe as warmth. Not emotional warmth. Thermal warmth. The sound itself seemed to carry heat. I felt it on the exposed skin of my face as a faint flush, like opening an oven door. Then it left. No ladder this time. One moment the catwalk was bearing weight, the next, silence. No descent. Just gone. Jesse spoke in the dark. That wasn't an animal. No, it was speaking. I don't know what it was doing. It was asking us something. I don't know. I rolled to face the wall. I don't know, and I'm not going to find out. The rule works. Go to sleep. He didn't push it, but I could feel his wakefulness across the cab, that electric attention of someone whose curiosity has been activated beyond what discipline can fully contain. The visits became more frequent after that. 3 times in the following week. Always the same new pattern, no ladder approach, sudden presence, knocking, the warm voice, cardinal pauses, departure without descent. Jesse started keeping a notebook. I saw him writing in it during the day, cross-referencing timestamps with our weather logs and fire activity reports. I didn't tell him to stop. I'd done the same thing. August 16th was the night Jesse broke the rule. I wasn't awake when it started. That's important. I'd been on day shift 14 hours in the chair tracking a complex fire on the Eastern District boundary, and I was deeply asleep when the knocking began. I came up from unconsciousness slowly, the way you do when exhaustion has you pinned. The sound was already in progress. 3 raps, pause, 3 raps, pause, the voice. But this time there was a second voice. Quiet, coming from inside the cab. Jesse was at the hatch, standing there in his underwear and hiking boots, his hand on the deadbolt, talking back to it. I couldn't make out what he was saying. His voice was low, directed at the hatch rather than into the room, but I could hear the alternation. The thing outside would speak its not-quite words, and Jesse would respond. Back and forth, like the cadence of a conversation, even if neither participant was producing intelligible language. "Jesse?" I swung my legs off the cot. "Step away from the hatch." He didn't turn around. "Jesse?" "It's okay." His voice was dreamy, unfocused. "It's okay. It's just asking. It's been asking for so long and nobody answers. It just wants to know if we're—" I crossed the cab and pulled him backward by the shoulder. He stumbled, blinked, seemed to surface from something. The voice outside stopped mid-syllable. Silence fell like a blade. Then, a single rap on the hatch. Not 3. 1, sharp, loud, definitive. The steel rang. Jesse flinched. "It heard me," he said. "It heard me answer, and now it knows." "Knows what?" "That we're awake, that we understand." "We don't understand anything. Get back in your—" The hatch exploded inward. Not physically, the bolt held, the hinges held. Nothing broke, but the sound that hit the hatch from outside was like a detonation. A single concussive blow that rattled every pane of glass in the cab, knocked gear off shelves, and sent the Osborne's map spinning on its bearings. The propane heater's pilot flame extinguished. The radio emitted a burst of white noise so loud I clapped my hands over my ears. Then nothing. Complete nothing. The catwalk was empty. I could feel the absence of weight in the floor joists, the way the steel settles differently when nothing is standing on it. Gone. Instantly. Jesse and I stood in the dark, ears ringing, surrounded by the smell of leaked propane and the scattered contents of our lives. The radio was dead. The solar panel indicator showed full charge, but the unit refused to power on. The emergency satellite phone, which I kept in a Pelican case under my cot, was undamaged. I turned it on. It had signal. I called no one. We didn't sleep. We relit the propane, cleaned up the debris, and sat in silence until dawn. When the sun came up, we went outside together, the first time I'd ever done the morning inspection with someone else present. The catwalk was undamaged. The ladder was undamaged. The hatch bolt had a slight bend to it that hadn't been there before, but it still functioned. On the ground beneath the tower, in the red volcanic dirt of the ridge, there was a single footprint. Not a boot print, not a bear track. A foot, longer than mine. I wear size 11 and narrow, with what looked like 6 toe impressions. Or maybe 5 toes and something else. The 6th impression was deeper than the others, offset toward the instep, more like a thumb than a toe. Jesse took a photograph. I watched him do it and said nothing. We both stared at the print for a long time. "I'm calling Emmons," I said. "He'll tell you to follow protocol." "I know. He'll tell you the protocol works. It doesn't anymore. You talked to it. You answered it. Something is different now." Jesse looked at me. His face was calm but pale. "You're right," he said. "I'm sorry. Are you? Or are you curious about what happens next?" He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I called Emmons. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. "Did either of you open the hatch?" "No." Then the protocol held. The protocol didn't hold, Emmons. It struck the door with enough force to knock everything off the walls. My radio is dead. The bolt is deformed. But it didn't get in. No. Then the protocol held. Pause. I'll send a crew up with a replacement radio and materials to reinforce the hatch. 2 days. In the meantime, use the sat phone for smoke reports. And Vásquez bolt the hatch. Don't engage. Don't respond. This has happened before. When? 1997. 2-person team, same tower. One of them responded verbally to the contact. Same escalation you describe. They reinforced the hatch, followed protocol strictly afterward, and it de-escalated within 2 weeks. What does de-escalated mean? Returned to passive observation. Circuits without contact attempts. And the person who responded? What happened to them? Silence, then. They finished the season, didn't return the following year. Where are they now? I don't know. Before my tenure. Emmons sent a maintenance crew 2 days later, 2 guys from the district shop who drove up on ATVs with lumber, steel plate, and a new VHF unit. They reinforced the hatch with an additional bolt and an angle iron brace. They said nothing about why. They were professional and efficient and slightly nervous in a way that suggested they knew exactly what they were reinforcing against and wanted very much to be off the ridge before dark. They were gone by 4 p.m. One of them, a bearded guy named Cal, who'd been friendly on the way up, paused at his ATV before leaving and called up to me on the catwalk. "Hey, Vásquez." I leaned over the railing. "You bolt that door every night. Hear me? Every night. And don't talk to it. I don't care what it says or what it sounds like or if it sounds like your mother calling your name. You don't talk to it." Sounds like your mother calling your name. He looked uncomfortable. It learns. That's what the old hands say. It picks up whatever you give it. You answer, it keeps your answer. Uses it next time. What does that mean? But he was already starting the ATV and the engine covered whatever he said next, if he said anything at all. The 2 weeks Emmons predicted came and went. The visits didn't de-escalate. If anything, they intensified nightly by late August, the knocking now accompanied by the voice using sounds that were increasingly structured. Not words I could understand, but syllable patterns that repeated consistently, as if a vocabulary was being assembled from raw sound. And 3 times August 22nd, 25th, and 29th. The voice incorporated sounds that were unmistakably sourced from Jesse's response. The exact tonal quality of his speech, his particular vowel sounds, replayed back through the hatch in new combinations. Cal was right. It had kept what Jesse gave it. Jesse stopped sleeping through the visits. He lay awake in his cot with his eyes closed, and I could see his lips moving in the dark, not speaking aloud, but shaping words silently, as if practicing or rehearsing. When I asked him about it, he said he was praying. Jesse wasn't religious. I didn't push it. September 4th. The night I'm actually here to tell you about. I was on night shift. Jesse was in his cot, asleep or performing sleep I couldn't tell anymore. The air was cold. First harder freeze of the season that afternoon, and the temperature was dropping fast. 28 degrees by midnight. The propane heater ran steady. The new radio was working fine. No active fires in our quadrant. The season was winding down. 2:07 a.m. No footsteps, no approach. The knocking started without preamble, but not on the hatch. On the floor. 3 raps from directly below the cab, against the underside of the floorboards. This had never happened. I sat upright in the chair. The sound came again. 3 raps, spaced exactly as the hatch knocking had always been. Then the voice, muffled by the floor but unmistakable, the same warm-toned, not quite language, with the same rising inflection at the end. Asking. Then a second point of knocking, on the northwest window. 3 raps against the glass. Not from outside on the catwalk. There were no footsteps, no weight on the grating. Something was touching the window without standing on the deck. Then a third point. The east window, simultaneous with the floor knocking. 3 voices now, the same voice, the same pitch, the same questioning phrase coming from 3 different locations around and beneath the cab. Jesse sat up. His eyes were open and entirely calm. "There's more than one," he said. And this is what occurred to me in the moment, with a clarity that felt like ice water in my chest. There had always been more than one, and only one had ever approached, while the others watched from below. And now the others were done watching. The knocking synchronized. All 3 points hit simultaneously. Floor, northwest window, east window. 3 raps, unified. The sound was enormous, a chord almost, the 3 surfaces resonating at different frequencies but locked in perfect rhythm. Then the voices spoke together, the same phrase, but now I could distinguish individual timbres. The one beneath the floor was deeper. The one at the northwest window had Jesse's vowels in it. The one at the east window was new lighter, faster, almost musical. And then a 4th point joined. The hatch, the old familiar spot. 3 raps from outside the door, 4 of them, all around us, asking from every direction at once. Jesse stood. He walked toward the hatch with the same dreaming calm as before, and this time I couldn't reach him fast enough. He put his hand on the new bolt, the reinforced one, and said clearly and loudly, "Yes." 1 word, spoken toward the hatch, given freely into the dark. The knocking stopped. All 4 points went silent simultaneously, but the silence that followed wasn't the familiar settling absence I'd learned over 4 years. It was a held silence, a waiting silence. the silence of a held breath before the next phrase. Then the hatch bolt, the new one, steel angle iron braced, began to slide open. By itself. The steel rod moved through its housing with a smooth mechanical action, as if operated by a key, except there was no key, and Jesse's hand was no longer touching it. I threw myself at the hatch, got my shoulder against it as the bolt cleared the strike plate. The exterior handle depressed. The hatch pushed inward, not explosively this time, but with steady, irresistible pressure. My boots slid on the floorboards. I weighed 190 pounds, braced with everything I had, and the door was pushing me backward an inch at a time. "Jesse, help me!" He didn't move. He stood 3 feet behind me, watching the hatch open against my shoulder with an expression of absolute peace. "It's okay," he said. "They just want us to come outside. It's after midnight. We don't go outside." That rule was for when they were asking. They're not asking anymore. The hatch opened 6 inches. Cold air rushed in. 26 degrees, carrying the smell of granite and frozen pine resin and something else. Something warm underneath the cold, like bread baking or sun-heated stone or the inside of a sleeping bag. A contradiction. Freezing air that smelled of warmth. Through the 6-inch gap I could see the catwalk. Illuminated by starlight, it was a clear night. Milky Way bright, the steel grating was empty. Nothing stood there. But the handle was depressed. The door was pushing inward, and the smell of warmth intensified with every inch of opening. I planted my feet and shoved back. The door hesitated. The pressure didn't increase, but it didn't relent either. I was at equilibrium, my full strength against whatever was pulling from outside. A stalemate. "Jesse, come hold this door." He didn't move. "Jesse!" I said yes. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "You heard me say it. They heard me. You can't take it back now." "The hell I can't. Get over here. You don't understand. They asked for 30 years and nobody answered. They came up every night and knocked and asked and nobody ever said yes. And all they wanted was—" He stopped. His face changed a flicker of something beneath the peace, a shadow crossing clear water. "All they want is to—" He didn't finish, because the knocking started again, but not from outside, from Jesse, from inside his chest. 3 raps, audible, resonant, as if his rib cage had become a door, and something behind it was knocking outward. He looked down at his own sternum, pressed his hand flat against it. His eyes went wide. The peace was gone. What replaced it was not fear exactly. It was recognition. The look of someone who has just realized that the voice they've been answering wasn't outside the door at all. "Colton," he said. "Colton, I think it's been inside me since the first time I—" The pressure on the hatch vanished. The door stopped pushing. I staggered forward into suddenly unresisted space and caught myself against the frame. The night outside was silent. No voice, no presence, no weight on the catwalk or below or at the windows. Just stars and cold and the absolute stillness of a high-altitude September night. I turned back to Jesse. He was standing in the center of the cab with his hand on his chest. His eyes were focused on something I couldn't see some interior distance. His lips were moving again, shaping silent words. "Jesse, talk to me." "It's okay." The dreaming voice was back. "It's okay. It was never outside. None of them were. The catwalk, the knocking, the ladder that was just how they reach up from the ground. They don't live up here, Colton. They live in the mountain. The tower is just tall enough for them to touch." "Jesse, you're not making sense. The tower sits on the granite spine. The granite goes down 1,000 feet. They're in the rock. They've always been in the rock. And this thing—" He tapped the floor with his foot. "This 60-foot steel thing we live in, it's the closest they can get. like reaching up from the bottom of a pool. The catwalk is as high as their arm can stretch. That's not, you can't know that. I can. He pressed his chest again. I can, because one of them is right here now, and it's showing me. And it's so glad, Colton. It's so unbelievably glad that someone finally answered. 30 years of asking, and they thought we couldn't hear them. They thought there was something wrong with the way they were asking. They kept trying different... His voice broke. Tears were running down his face, but his expression was bliss. Pure bliss. I called Emmons on the sat phone at 2:41 a.m. September the 4th. I need an extraction. Toussaint is compromised. Define compromised. He's in contact with whatever lives in this ridge, and he's not able to function independently. He spoke to it. He said yes to it. And now I don't know what it's doing. He says it's inside him. The longest silence Emmons had ever given me. Then, don't let him outside. He's not trying to go outside. Don't let him outside. It's critical that he stays inside the cab until we can get a team up there. Daylight. We'll have people on the ridge by noon. Why? What happens if he goes outside? Just keep him inside. Can you do that? Yes. And Vásquez, don't open the hatch. Not until the team arrives. Even after dawn. Keep it bolted. Even after dawn. The protocol has changed. As of now, the hatch stays bolted until I tell you otherwise. He disconnected. Jesse sat cross-legged on his cot, eyes closed, hands palm up on his knees, breathing in long, slow cycles. Peaceful. Present. He looked like someone meditating. Occasionally, his lips would move and sounds would emerge, not his sounds. The warm tonality of the voice from outside, the not quite language, but shaped differently now with Jesse's particular rhythm and emphasis. A hybrid. He opened his eyes at dawn and smiled at me. They're pleased, he said. They were so lonely. Jesse, a team is coming at noon. We're going to get you off this ridge. I know. That's okay. He stretched, yawned, stood. They understand. They're patient. They've been patient for God, Colton. You wouldn't believe how long. The granite here is 400 million years old. That's how long they've been in it. And the tower is only 70 years old. 70 years of trying to reach up into open air and touch something that thinks the way they do. That's nothing to them. They can wait more. Wait for what? He looked at me with genuine compassion. For someone to come outside. The team arrived at noon. Emmons himself was there, first time he'd been on the ridge in my 4 seasons. With him came 2 district employees I didn't recognize, and a woman in civilian clothes who carried a medical bag. They came up the ladder single file while I watched from inside through the window. Emmons knocked on the hatch. 3 knocks, and I flinched so hard I bit my tongue and called my name. I unbolted the hatch and let them in. Jesse went willingly. He walked down the ladder between 2 of them, steady on his feet. Calm, no resistance. At the bottom, he paused and placed his palm flat against the tower's south leg. The steel angle iron anchored in a concrete footing sunk into the ridge's native granite. He held it there for a moment, eyes closed. Then he smiled, withdrew his hand, and walked to the waiting vehicle. The woman, the one with the medical bag, stayed behind. She spent 2 hours in the cab, taking photographs, running some kind of RF meter over the walls and floor, and collecting air samples in small glass tubes. She didn't speak to me except to ask practical questions about ventilation and the propane system. When she was done, she stood at the center of the cab and looked at the floor. Has the temperature in here ever felt inconsistent with external conditions? She asked. What do you mean? Warmer than it should be, unexpectedly warm, especially near the floor. I thought about it. Sometimes, in spring when the heating's off and it should be cold. I assumed it was thermal mass from the sun on the roof. She wrote something in a notebook. Then she looked at me. Her expression was clinical but not unkind. Mr. Vásquez, I'm going to recommend that Ridgeback be closed for the remainder of the season. Is Jessie going to be okay? I don't have an answer for that yet. She packed her equipment. What I can tell you is that you've done nothing wrong. The protocol you followed was correct and adequate for the conditions that existed prior to this season. The change in behavior is not something you could have prevented. What changed? Why is it different now? She paused at the hatch. In my experience, and I say this with the caveat that my experience is limited to 3 other sites, the behavioral shift occurs when they receive a response. Before that, they're reaching. After that, they're connecting. It's a qualitative phase transition, like a chemical bond forming. 3 other sites. I'm not authorized to discuss them. Are they all like this? Towers on granite ridges? She was quiet. Then, they're all structures that reach. That's the commonality, not the geology beneath the height above it. Anything that extends 60 feet or more into open air from a geological substrate that meets certain criteria. She stopped herself. I've said too much. You'll receive a formal debrief at district. For now, pack your personal effects. Leave all government property. A crew will winterize the tower by end of week. I packed in 20 minutes. Everything I owned that mattered fit in a dry bag and a backpack. Before I left, I stood on the catwalk one last time. The view was enormous. 100 miles of mountain and forest, blue-purple in the September light. The air smelled of pine and cold granite. Somewhere underneath me, 400 million years of stone pressed against the tower's footings, and something in that stone was what? Glad? Lonely? Reaching? I put my hand on the railing. The steel was warm. Not sun-warm, the sun was behind clouds. Warm from below. Rising through the lattice structure of the tower, up through 60 feet of angle iron and cross-bracing from the concrete footings in the granite, a subtle thermal presence. The temperature of a living body. I removed my hand and went down the ladder for the last time. That was 9 months ago. I'm back in Missoula now, tending bar. My knee works fine. I don't work lookouts anymore. The district offered me a posting at Blacktail Butte for next season, a solo tower, low elevation, sandstone substrate. I declined. Jessie is in a facility in Boise. I know this because Emmons told me during my debrief, which was short and concluded with a document I signed agreeing not to discuss the operational details of Ridgeback Tower with anyone outside the Forest Service. A document, I'll note, that I'm violating now. Jessie sends me letters. One every 2 weeks, handwritten, postmarked, Boise. They're lucid, articulate, and warm. He talks about the food, the other patients, the counselors. He says he feels fine. He says the connection is still there, quieter now, attenuated by distance, but present, like a radio signal just below the threshold of intelligibility, a carrier tone with no modulation. In his last letter, 3 weeks ago, he wrote something that keeps me awake. They're not angry that we left, Colton. They're not angry at all. They understand time differently than we do. 30 years of asking wasn't frustration for them. It was a single sentence they were trying to finish. And I helped them finish it. That was all. One sentence, completed after 30 years. And now they're starting the next one. They have so much they want to say. I think about the woman's words. Structures that reach, 60 feet or more. Geological substrate meeting certain criteria. I think about radio towers, cell towers, wind turbines, transmission pylons. Every tall thing humans have planted in stone across every mountain range in this country. And I think about what Jessie said about patience. They waited 30 years at Ridgeback. They knocked every night for 30 years before someone answered. That's devotion. That's commitment to communication so absolute, it redefines what those words mean. 3 nights ago, at 2:14 a.m., in my apartment on the second floor of a building on South Higgins Avenue in Missoula, Montana, a building constructed on a concrete foundation that sits on river-deposited granite cobble, overlying the deep bedrock of the Clark Fork drainage. I heard 3 knocks coming from beneath my floor. I haven't answered. But I lie awake now every night, and I feel the warmth rising through the building's bones. That faint thermal contradiction. Cold air, warm floor. The temperature of something alive, rising through stone and concrete and lumber to touch the thin membrane of inhabited space above it. And I hear Jesse's voice in my memory, not the peace-filled voice from that last night in the tower, but something worse. The sound of someone who was right. Who was right about everything, who answered a question that had been asked for 30 years and discovered that the answer was what they'd always wanted it to be. They just want to talk, and the next sentence has already started. And sooner or later, in 30 years or 30 nights or 30 seconds, someone is going to answer again. Maybe me. Maybe the person in the apartment below me, or the one above. Maybe someone in a high-rise in Seattle, or a radio tower in Montana, or a wind farm on a ridgeline in Wyoming. Anyone. Everyone. Every person who lives 60 feet above bedrock that is 400 million years old and full of something that has been trying to speak for longer than language has existed. The knocking comes every night now. I've started counting. Not because it helps, because counting is the last thing I know how to do that isn't answering. And the count is getting harder to maintain, because the warmth is so gentle. And the questions sound so kind. And Jesse's letters keep arriving, lucid and calm and grateful. And the worst part, the part that wakes me gasping at 3 a.m. with my hand pressed to the floor, is that I don't know what they're asking. But I want to. God help me, I want to.